Hello, everybody. I'm Ulrike Al-Khamis, Director of Collections and Public Programs at the Aga Khan Museum here in Toronto. Thank you for joining us today, and thank you, of course, to the Toronto staff for making this presentation today possible. I work in the Aga Khan Museum, which is the only Islamic art museum in the whole of North America. And our mandate is to bridge cultures through the arts, to foster intercultural dialogue, and to use the arts for peacemaking and for building a better world hand in hand with cultures across the spectrum. Of course, at the moment, like everyone else, we are still closed, but we are very excited to work towards our reopening, which I hope will happen very, very soon. But meanwhile, we have moved all our programming online. So please have a look at our website, www.agakhanmuseum.org. We are also on social media, Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. And there's a lot out there that you might want to explore. We have virtual tours of our museum galleries, we have virtual exhibitions, we have a very lively virtual museum program, which again, you find out more under hashtag Museum Without Walls. So lots to explore. And today I would like to take you through one of our most popular exhibitions ever, The Moon, A Voyage Through Time, which was an exhibition which staged last year and revolves around a subject that is universal to all of us. We all, wherever we are from in the world, whatever our background, love the moon. We project our hopes, we project our romantic or spiritual emotions onto the moon. We share our memories with the moon. We look to the moon in wonder, and we always have this longing to get to the moon. And of course, last year was the 50th anniversary of the first landing on the moon on the 20th of July, 1969. And it was the most amazing achievement for humanity. But it was also an achievement that would not have been possible without the contributions of cultures within the Muslim world, with scientists and scholars over centuries exploring and discovering and then contributing to the evolution of modern space science in many different ways. So allow me to take you with me on a journey of discovery through The Moon, A Voyage Through Time. Here we are in the entrance of the exhibition, and the exhibition was conceived, as I said, around the idea, as Rumi puts it, we see the same moon, you and I. All of us share the moon. And therefore, it is befitting to start our exhibition with exactly that. The moon, our nearest planet of fascination to us all, and of course, also something that we were able to actually, in the exhibition, literally step onto, because our friends at the ROM lent us a splinter from the moon, which was unromantically called NWA 3163. And it is a splinter that apparently was chipped off the moon by an asteroid that hit it and landed on Earth. And the moon, of course, is age-old. At the moment, the calculations stand at 4.53 billion years, of similar age to the Earth, and assumed at some point in the distant past to actually have split off the Earth. So the moon is universal, but the moon also has a very specific significance in Muslim faith and spirituality. And of course, anyone across the world knows about the presence of Muslim communities, often being symbolized by a crescent moon. And you often find crescent moons as finials on the top of mosque domes. Interestingly, as a symbol in art and architecture, the crescent isn't quite that old. We know through the sources that it is perhaps emerging around the 15th century, but only really come into wide use in the 18th and 19th century as an emblem of the Ottoman Empire with its capital in Istanbul. Within Islamic faith, of course, everything is ultimately driven by the word of God that for Muslims is encapsulated in the sacred book of Islam, the Holy Quran. And I'm showing you here 3 pages and 1 manuscript referring to the Quran. And it is in this work, which is for Muslims, the Word of God manifest, that the role of the moon is very, very clearly laid down. It is understood to be a part of God's creation. It was created for the benefit of humanity, and it is also one of God's signs to be beheld. It moves in an eternal path and has its station in harmony with the sun as they change positions, moving from day to night and from night to day. The crescent moon per se is given to mankind to indicate time and to mark the passing of the months. And determining the seasons as well as ritual occasions like the fasting month of Ramadan, which of course this year ran from late April to late May, and the annual pilgrimage that Muslims are required to undertake once in their lifetime if physically and financially able to Mecca in Saudi Arabia. So the moon is of central importance in organizing Muslim lives. And I want to take you to an example that relates to the fasting month of Ramadan, given that we have just passed this in our calendar this year. This is a beautiful 19th century painting from Iran. And it shows the moment before the breaking of the fast in the month of Ramadan, or perhaps even the moment of the ending of the month, because the new month is indicated by the first sighting of the new crescent moon. And if you can look closely, I'll try to zoom in a little bit more, you will see at the top a little turret on the pavilion at the back with a man standing and looking at the hardly visible crescent moon high up in the sky. The moment the crescent moon is seen, the fasting month comes to an end and the celebrations start with lush foods and people getting together, families getting together to celebrate. The moon also has a very important role to play in the sciences. And I said at the beginning that modern space technology and science and also astronomy would not have reached the apex that it did with the landing on the moon in 1969 without the contributions of Islamic scientists and scholars. And of course, when I say Islamic scientists, I do by no means only mean Muslims, because the project was a project that brought together the best of their field across the religions. There were Jewish and Christian and Zoroastrian and Hindu and Muslim scientists all working together. And at the beginning of the Islamic era in the 8th, 9th century, it was those experts that were brought together by the rulers at the time in Baghdad, Iraq, to collect what had survived of the scientific knowledge of the ancient world and translate it from their various languages into Arabic, which at that time was the lingua franca of the intellectuals and scholars. And this translation movement then led to a whole body of knowledge from Spain to ancient China becoming available in one language that the scholars and scientists could discuss, analyze, but also criticize and build on. And a lot of innovation was built on the knowledge that had survived. The reason for that was that within Islam, knowledge seeking is a central principle. And even the Prophet Muhammad has said, seek knowledge, even if you have to go as far as China. And the reason for that is, of course, both spiritual and practical. Because from a spiritual point of view, it was understood that learning and seeking knowledge would bring you closer to understanding and appreciate the perfect and eternal complexity and harmony of God's universe. But of course, from a practical point of view, of course, with the Islamic world expanding and Islamic empires expanding, knowledge was needed of the skies and land and sea to know how to navigate, to know how to travel, to know how to calculate distances, and to know how to calculate time. And on our right here, we have a case of wonderful astrolabes that were lent to us by the Museum of Scientific History in Oxford, England. And these astrolabes were among the central instruments that were used in surveying and navigating, and of course in calculating the time and surveying the skies. And of course, the astrolabe is an invention that actually goes back to ancient Greece around the 3rd century BCE, but it was one of those legacies that were affected by scholars and scientists in the Muslim world. And it became crucial for calculating prayer times and distances and surveying the skies. And many, many treatises were written, many manuscripts were written with astronomical tables, diagrams, data, we would call it today. And many of them also incorporated philosophical, astrological elements, because at the time, the science of astronomy and astrology were not seen as separate. They were all part of the quest for understanding the mystery of God's universe in the most comprehensive form possible. As a result of all these endeavors, science made considerable advances, and by the 11th, 12th century already, the writings of Islamic scientists were coming over to Europe, were translated into Latin, and considerably contributed to laying the foundation stones for the European Renaissance and modern science. And today we have 300,000 craters on the moon, and 20 of those, in recognition of these contributions, are named after Islamic scientists, including Al-Khwarazmi, who was a 9th century scientist who also incidentally gave us the algorithms that we all struggled with at school. Ibn Sina, from the 11th century, who is known in the West as Avicenna, and was not only an astronomer by any means. He was a mathematician, a doctor, a medical scientist, and like many of his contemporaries across the centuries, a polymath. So someone that was not only interested in a wide range of subjects, but also deeply knowledgeable and skilled in many disciplines. And even Ibn Battuta, the intrepid traveler of the 14th century, is eternalized in one of the craters on the moon. So the moon was one of those planets that was very much at the focus of astronomy and astrology, and that was also reflected in artworks. Here we have miniature painting from a Falname, which is a book of omens that was created in India in the second half of the 16th century. And in traditions related to the moon, it tended to have female qualities. And therefore we see here a full moon face, a lady's face, surrounded by a crescent moon. And the moon was seen, the full moon was seen as a good omen that predicted good fortune looking into the future. And it is very interesting that it appears in a book written around the year 1000 in the Islamic calendar. And just like we have seen anxieties around the turn of centuries, or more recently, turn of millennia, with people getting really scared and worried about what this turn might bring in terms of their fortunes, so too in the Islamic world, around major milestones in the calendar, people needed reassurance sometimes that things would be okay, and looked to the planets and the stars, which were seen as signs of God, to predict what the future might hold. But of course, the moon is not only important in the sciences, the moon is also very important in the arts. And I should say that and I got lost here, forgive me, I just need to go back for you a little bit. in Islamic culture, the sciences, faith, and the arts cannot be separated. They are understood to be different manifestations of the same worldview. I'm just trying to get you to this point here. So, looking at the arts of the Islamic world, the moon also has a crucial importance. And it appears as a symbol of beauty, of God's beauty, of the beauty of the universe, but also of physical beauty. And as I said, in Islamic worldview, notions of faith, science, and the art are always intertwined. And I stopped at this beautiful manuscript of Shahnameh, which is the Iranian epic, the Book of Kings. The introduction to the work, which was initially written in the early 11th century, but here a copy from 15th century Iran, gives us a very wonderful feeling of how faith, science, and the arts come together in this literary and artistic manuscript. And I will read you the introduction. In the name of the Lord, of both wisdom and mind, To nothing sublimer can thought be applied. The Lord of whatever is named or assigned a place, the sustainer of all and the guide, the Lord of Saturn and the turning sky, who causes Venus, sun, and moon to shine, who is above conception, name or sign, the artist of the heavens' jewelry. So in this introduction, you see references to faith, science, and the arts coming together in the most beautiful way. The moon was also associated with symbolizing the beauty of religious personalities. So when we look at these items here, I see. Here we have two word portraits of the Prophet Muhammad. And what they actually show is a description by his cousin and son-in-law Ali that refers to both the Prophet's physical features and his moral characteristics. And the invocation through words is enclosed in crescentic circles in both these artworks. One of them from the 18th century, and the one on the right, actually, a contemporary work continuing the tradition that was first developed by a calligrapher called Hafiz Osman in the 17th century, and created by an American Muslim calligrapher called Muhammad Zakaria. So here in these word portraits, the ideal physical and spiritual beauty of the Prophet is evoked for the beholder and for the reader to conjure up a vision, as it were, of the ideal characteristics of the Prophet. The moon, of course, was also used for very literally celebrating the physical beauty of both men and women. Try and get you there in one piece, because moon faces or moroi are found repeatedly in miniature paintings, but also on artworks. And here we have two ceramics from the 13th century and again from Iran. And I'm trying to zoom in for you a little bit, as much as I can, to show you the figures on the little dish and particularly on the jar. And I hope you can just see that the figures, who may be male or may be female, have round moon faces, almond-shaped eyes, and narrow crescentic eyebrows. And these features, all relating to the moon, were considered as the very height of beauty and attraction. Of course, no civilization and no culture develops in isolation. And that is why at the end of this part of the gallery, we have a little discursive area which looks at the meaning of the moon in ancient cultures, because, sorry, I need to get you back. Because in ancient cultures, of course, the moon already had great significance. And particularly in the region that we now call the Islamic world, like the southern Mediterranean, ancient Iraq, Iran, ancient Egypt. And over millennia, people looked up to the moon and associated cosmological qualities with the moon, but also personified the moon as divine, with, or endowed the moon with divine characteristics. So on the left, we have here a fragment, again kindly lent by the ROM, which shows the moon personified as Selene, as she was called in the Greek mythology, or Luna in the Roman mythology. And royalty was also associated with the moon and had relationships in mythology with the celestial bodies. So on the right, we have a relief of Ahmosi, who was the daughter of the pharaoh queen Hatshepsut from the 15th century BCE. This one is a copy of the original. And Ahmosi is actually named after the moon because her name means born of the moon. So royalty associated themselves with the celestial planets, and the beliefs of ancient civilizations often saw divine qualities in the moon. And of course, the moon goes back in time, but the moon will also go forth in time. The moon is eternal. And that is why the last part of the gallery focuses around an artwork that was created by a British artist called Luke Jerram, who, as a little boy, was fascinated that in his hometown of Bristol, the tides seemed very, very extreme. And he learned that it was the moon that was responsible for causing these extreme tides. And he started to become fascinated by the moon and its pull, very literally, on the sea, but also on our lives, and on the fact that all of us look up at the same moon, and all of us indeed look up at the same side of the moon. So it is the ultimate unifier. So for our exhibition, he created a bespoke 5-meter version of an illuminated moon sculpture that also comes with a soundscape, and that is based on 120 dpi detailed NASA imagery of the lunar surface. It's created to scale for 1 centimeter to 500,000, so equating to roughly 1 centimeter to 5 kilometers on the moon's surface. And it is designed for people to get up as close as is possible to the moon, to reflect, to project their thoughts and aspirations and hopes and dreams onto the moon. And while it was part of our exhibition, at the time, we also invited people, as you can just see downstairs in the permanent gallery, to lounge beneath the moon and look up and contemplate and reflect. The remainder of the gallery shows works by contemporary artists from the Muslim world to emphasize the fact that, of course, not around the world, not only in the Muslim world, but throughout the world, artists today continue to engage with the moon and to project their personal search, but also the aspirations of humanity as a whole onto the moon. And I would like to finish with this work by the Iranian artist Ala Ebtikar, who is based in the States. And for me, it is the perfect symbol of how the moon unites all of us and all our cultures through the approach he takes to this artwork. As you can see, the moon, again, the surface of the moon is made up of 36 little fragments. These fragments, each one of them, represent a page from a piece of literature, a piece of poetry, a piece of music created by artists around the world and referencing the moon. He overprinted these pages with the lunar surface and then covered them with a light-sensitive chemical substance. He then exposed the arrangement to the night sky, to the light of the moon and the stars. And the chemical substance reacted to the UV light that was emitted by this night sky, and created and brought to the surface the moon that unites all the elements in this artwork. So to me, it is a wonderful symbol of how we all come together, how we are all part of a universal and eternal puzzle that only in some makes sense and that only in some makes beauty and can take us forward into eternity. I hope you enjoyed this brief excursion into the mysteries of the moon, the beauty of the moon, the spiritual dimensions of the moon. Thank you very much for listening. And as I said at the beginning, please do visit us on our virtual platforms. Follow us on social media, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, at Aga Khan Museum, our website with our resources. And please, we are waiting for you. As soon as we reopen, follow our news regarding the reopening. Our arms will be open before our doors. Please come back and take care, stay safe, and much love from the Aga Khan Museum.